Okay, so I want to welcome everybody to Congregation B'nai Jacob's first, and I hope only video Seder. Here's my table, which I've set for you a few days early for Passover. And I want to say a few words of introduction. First of all, I'm very grateful that Cantor Kanfer is here with me to do this. Second of all, which doesn't really mean why is this night different from all other nights, but oh my God, this night is so different from all other nights, which we can certainly say with full feeling this year. I first of all trust that you're all having Zoom guests at your Seder and not any real guests, virtual guests, and the only real guests that you're going to have are the people you're living with. Please, please, please stay safe. Pikuach nefesh, the mitzvah of saving life and preserving life, comes before anything else. I also want to say that two things. One is I thought a little bit about this Seder, and I thought how, the very first Seder that was ever celebrated was celebrated by the Israelite people in Egypt when we were still enslaved on the night of Leil Pesach, on the night when God passed over our houses and slayed the firstborn of the Egyptian. So first of all, it was slayed under, it took place in a plague. Second of all, it was not like a leisurely affair with reclining like we do nowadays, right? Each person ate their lamb and their matzah and their bitter herbs, loins girded, sandals on, stick in hand, ready to go. In other words, in a moment of great stress and uncertainty about the future, about whether they were really getting out of there or not. And I always thought of that Seder as in contrast to our Seders of luxury and relaxation. And I'm not saying we're exactly living under slavery by any means, but I think we can relate much more to the fear of that first Seder and to the fear that the Jewish people have had throughout the ages during blood libels in medieval Europe when Jews were accused of killing Christian babies in order to make matzah. During the Shoah, when Jews in the camps risked their lives to save their flour rations and make 3 little matzahs and use a rusty coffee cup as, wine and find a place to hide and do a Seder in secret. So ours is not the first generation to make Seder under different and less than ideal conditions, which I think leads me to in some ways, the main point of Seder, which is that we do this Seder for ourselves, but we also do it for the future. When our children and our grandchildren see us doing Seder, we're saying, I'm here. I'm staking out my place as a Jew doing this. And regardless of what happens to me, I'm passing this on with faith that future generations will sit down and make Seder in their way, differently than I'm doing tonight. And so it's a tremendous expression of hope, I think, sort of a fishing line of hope cast into the future that we do tonight and that Jews have always done whenever we sit down to Seder. I just want to say a couple things about a Zoom Seder. First of all, I have no experience with a Zoom Seder. Second of all, I've read lots of things online giving you tips for how to do a Zoom Seder. And what's evident is nobody has any tips for a Zoom Seder either. Here's the only thing I can think of to say. I imagine that it will be very boring, as you'll soon find out, to hear the leader, in this case me, drone on and on endlessly. It will be best if you do 2 things. One is share a Haggadah, or 3 things. Share a Haggadah, a PDF, the PDF we're sending you, or any Haggadah, so everybody can be on the same page. go around and have different people read, and assign people in your Zoom group, in your family and friends who are joining you different parts of the Seder, so that they will lead an activity or speak about or introduce the different parts of the Seder. So it's not all on you, because as boring as that is in person, it's twice as boring online. And remember, every Seder, the Haggadah is like a jazz riff, right? These are notes. They're not meant to be played the same way by each person each year. Consider this the backbone of the Seder you make, and make the right Seder for your family this year. Whether it's very important to you to hold on to everything that's traditional because things are so different, or whether you want to totally innovate. Maybe you want to do the 4 questions and the plays and the things that are fun for the kids really early on, so that then the kids could go to bed and you could have a Zoom Seder with the adults. You figure out what works for you, because remember that at the end of the day, when the temple was built, Seder was a ritual or Passover was a ritual that took place in the temple. The priests did the sacrifice on the altar. Once the temple was destroyed, and we'll read a little of that story today, the Jewish people were entrusted with the responsibility of making Seder. Each home was a mikdash ma'at, a miniature temple. Each head of the Seder, his own Kohen Gadol. And this most sacred of rituals, this most important of rituals, was given to each of us, trusted to each of us, to do as we will, with the full trust that however we would do it, it would be enough. So, all that said, we're going to begin with the reading about the Mayflower on page 4. The Jewish Mayflower. David Ben-Gurion, first Prime Minister of the State of Israel, described the importance of the memories preserved on Pesach as he argued for the right to a Jewish state in 1947 in his testimony to the UN Commission on the Partition of Palestine. Now I'm quoting Ben-Gurion. 300 years ago, a ship called the Mayflower set sail to the New World. This was a great event in the history of England. Yet I wonder if there is one Englishman who knows at what time the ship set sail. Do the English know how many people embarked on this voyage? What quality of bread did they eat? Yet more than 3,000 years ago, before the Mayflower set sail, the Jews left Egypt. Every Jew in the world, even in America or Soviet Russia, knows on exactly what day they left, the 15th of the month of Nisan. Everyone knows what kind of bread the Jews ate. Even today, the Jews worldwide eat matzah on the 15th of Nisan. They retell the story of the Exodus and all the troubles Jews have endured since being exiled. They conclude this evening with 2 statements. This year slaves, next year free. This year here, next year in Jerusalem, in Zion, in Eretz Yisrael. That is the nature of the Jews. We are going now to turn to page 5 and recite the order of the Seder. The cantor is going to sing this order for you, and I'm going to do the hand gestures. And then as we get to each part of the Seder, we'll sing our way up to that part. Okay. Kadesh, Orchatz, Arpas, Yachatz, Magi, Matzah, Motzi, Matzah, Maror, Korech, Shulchan Orech, Tzafun Arech, Halel Yitzchak. Kadesh. This is the first cup of wine, and it's a custom in our house to dedicate each of the cups of wine to a freedom fighter and to invite 4 different people before the Seder to prepare a freedom fighter for the cup that they're going to dedicate. Also, when we say Kadesh, as we do with all the other mitzvot of Passover, we lean left. Why do we lean left? Obviously, because that's the right way to lean. No, really, because this meal was traditionally eaten with low on the ground, like on pillows, on a divan. Think about Cleopatra or something. So if you were right-handed, you leaned on your left arm with your legs out, and you ate with your right hand. So that's a leisurely meal in the ancient world. That's a Greek symposia. And that's how we eat this meal.
Baruch, am I going, Kiddush? Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim Asher bachar banu mikol ha'am v'lo b'manu mikol ha'shon v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzidkenu Eloheinu b'yahava moadim l'simcha chagim uzmanim l'sason et yom chag hamatzot hazeh Zman cherutenu mikra kodesh zecher l'tziat mitzrayim kivanu acharta v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim umoadei kodshecha b'simcha uv'sason hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Kadesh Orchatz. So sometimes some people have everybody wash at this juncture in the Seder, and sometimes just the leader washes. I'm going to wash right now. And then we're going to say, Kadesh Orchatz Karpas. I have some lovely karpas here. And I'm going to dip it in salt water. Sign of spring, the tears of our slavery. And we're going to say together, Bracha.
We could just say Baruch
atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri ha'adama. Malach, you want a bite? It's very good. Should eat that more often. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz. So now I'm going to take, here's my matzah here. I'm going to take the middle one out. You see it? I'm going to break it in half. I think which one? The big one goes in the afikoman? I think so. And I have this nice afikoman bag, which, oh my goodness, it has matzah crumbs from last year.
Beautiful, wow.
See, it's, do you see what it is? It's Ethiopian, and there's the plane from Operation Solomon, and the Ethiopians boarding the plane to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, I'm going to hide this somewhere. It will be difficult for you to find. However, I'm told that there's all kinds of ways you can make like internet searches for afikomen. So I hope you'll figure that out. Okay. Now, I didn't read that. Okay, a false start, page 13. The beginning of the Seder seems strange. We start with Kiddush as we normally would when we begin any festive meal. Then we wash, but without a blessing, and break bread without eating it. What's going on here? It seems that the beginning of the Seder is a kind of false start. We act as if we are going to begin the meal, but then we realize that we can't. We can't really eat this meal until we understand it, until we tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. So we interrupt our meal preparations with magi. Only once we have told this story do we make Kiddush again, that's the second cup, wash our hands again, ratzah, this time with a blessing, and break bread, motzi matzah, and eat it this time. In order to savor this meal, in order to appreciate the sweet taste of Passover, we must first tell our story. And now we're on page 14. I'm going to lift my matzah plate.
Halachma, halachma anya di achalu, achalu ahavtana, be'ara dimitzrayim, be'ara dimitzrayim, kodichvin yete v'yechol, koditzrich yete v'yifsach, השטחה לשנה הבאה בארעד ישראל, השטח לשנה הבאה בני חורין.
So, a nice thing about Passover is when you go to other people's homes, you pick up their customs that you didn't know about. So this is a Moroccan custom. And what we do is we take the Seder plate. See my Seder plate?
Yeah.
And we're going to wave it over each person's head at the table while we sing these words. I'll sing it twice just so you get the idea of it. And if you can't, you can sing and people can do it you can take turns on Zoom. And while the plate is being waved over your head, the idea is to make a wish for the year to come. And the words are, in English, in haste we left Egypt. This is the bread of our affliction. Now we are free. In other words, a very quick, easy summary of the Passover story. And it goes like this. Bivhilu yatzanu mitzrayim, halachma anya b'nei chorin. And then I'd move to the next person. Bivhilu yatzanu mitzrayim, halachma anya b'nei chorin. Okay. Now we're on page 16. The 4 questions. I want to say that the 4 questions were added to our Seder because it could happen that nobody had any questions or nobody had the knowledge to ask questions or knew how to ask questions. But the 4 questions are only there if nobody asks a spontaneous question. So questions, original questions, should be encouraged at the Seder. In some years when my children were little, I kept a bag of candy near me. And if you asked a good question, I threw a piece of candy at you. So we will sing the 4 questions. I don't know about you guys, but the youngest person in my family really can't stand doing this. So you can figure out how to distribute it more fairly.
מה נשתנה הלילה הזה מכל הלילות, מכל הלילות, שבכל הלילות אנו תלויים Chametu matzah, Chametu matzah. Halayla hazeh, kulo matzah. Halayla hazeh, kulo matzah. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים שאר ירקות, שאר ירקות. הלילה הזה, מרור, מרור. הלילה הזה, מרור, מרור. שבכל הלילות אין אנו מטביעים אפילו פעם אחת, אפילו פעם אחת. הלילה הזה, שטף עמים. הלילה הזה, שטף עמים. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים בין יושבים ובין מסובים, בין יושבים ובין
מסובים.
הלילה הזה, כולנו מסובים. הלילה הזה, כולנו מסובים.
Page 18, Seeing the World as a Question by Milan Kundera. A story doesn't declare a thing. A story merely searches for and raises questions. I make up stories. I make them confront each other. And in this manner, I ask questions. Stupidity stems from people thinking that they have an answer for everything. The story's wisdom stems from the fact that everything raises a question. A writer teaches the reader to perceive the world as a question. There is wisdom and patience in this approach. In a world created out of absolute certainties, the story dies. The totalitarian world is based on answers instead of questions. In that world, the story has no place. In any event, it appears to me that all over the contemporary world, people prefer to pass judgment than to understand, prefer to answer rather than to question. We also have a long Haggadah called Uncle Eli's Haggadah, which is kind of a Dr. Seuss Haggadah. And I'm just going to read you Uncle Eli's questions. Why is it only on Passover night? We never know how to do anything right. We don't eat our meals in the regular ways, the ways that we do on all other days. On all other nights, we may eat all kinds of wonderful, good bready treats, like big purple pizza that tastes like a pickle, crumbly crackers and pink pumpernickel, sassafras sandwich and tiger and rye, 50 falafels in pita, fresh fried, with peanut butter and tangerine sauce spread onto each side, up and down, then across, and toasted whole wheat bread with liver and ducks, and crumpets and dumplings and bagels and lox, and donuts with 1 hole and donuts with 4, and cake with 6 layers and windows and doors. Yes, on all other nights we eat all kinds of breads, but tonight of all nights we munch matzah instead. We come now to Avadim Hayinu, page 21, the simple answer to the 4 questions, and I'm going to uncover the matzah while we sing this.
עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורין, בני חורין. עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורין. עבדים היינו, אתה בני חורין, בני חורין.
The 4 children, page 22, which is a really ingenious statement of the rabbis, that long before there was a concept called differentiated learning, the rabbis said that parents and teachers do not fulfill their obligation of teaching by just teaching the same thing and hoping that all the kids get it. That rather we have to teach according to each learner, one who is wise, one who is wicked, one who is simple, one who is too young to know how to ask. And each of them each learner at our table deserves to have the story of the Exodus from Egypt told in a way that they can understand. We introduce this part of the Haggadah with Baruch HaMakom.
Baruch HaMakom, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Shenatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael, Baruch Hu, Keneged Arba Afanim, Divra Torah, Echad Chacham ve'echad Rasha ve'echad Tam ve'echad she'eino yodea lishor.
And I think that rather than reading these traditional for children,
said the parents to their children at the
Seder you will dine, you will eat your fill of matzah,
you will drink
4 cups of wine.
Now these parents had
Had for
children,
children, get their kids, they numbered 4.
One was
One was wise and one was wicked.
One was simple and the poor, and the fourth
was
sweet
sweet.
and winsome, was so young and not so small. While the others asked the questions, this one could not speak at all. Said the wise one to the parents, "Could you please explain the laws of the customs of the Seder? Will you please explain the cause?" And the parents
proudly answered, "'Cause their
forebears ate the Pesach lamb ere midnight, and from slavery were freed. So we follow their example, and ere midnight we must eat the afikomen, oh so tasty, which must be our final treat." Then did sneer the child so wicked, "What does all this mean to you?" And the parents' voice was bitter as their grief and anger grew. "If yourself
you don't consider
as a child of Israel, then for you
this
had no
meaning,
could be a slave as well." Then the simple child said simply, "What is this?" inquired. The good parents told their offspring, "We were freed from slavery." But the youngest child was silent and just could not ask at all. But with eyes all bright with wonder, listen to the details all. Now, dear children, heed the lesson and remember evermore what the parents told their children, told their kids who numbered 4.
So, we often do 2 discussions in our Seder at this point. First of all, if you have this wonderful Haggadah by David Moss, in the middle, he has all kinds of artistic illustrations of the 4 children. And sometimes we make copies of these and give them out to people so that they can discuss them and talk about what they might mean. Like this is a really cool one. You see the 4 books? So one's on fire, one's blank, one's open with text, one's closed. So which is which? First you might say, oh, that's the wicked child who's burning the book. Or maybe that's the wise child who's on fire with knowledge. Is the closed book the one who doesn't know how to ask? Or is it a simple child or a wicked child who rejects what's in the book? And you can see, you can play with this. So David Moss, did I say David Moss? I meant Noam Tzion is the editor of this Haggadah. But David Moss has a illustration of the 4 children in his Haggadah that looks like this. And I'm going to read the text here. David Moss, an incredible Jewish artist, published a magnificent Haggadah. On the page of the four children, he depicts each child as a playing card. Each child holds a book. The wise child is reading it. The wicked child is on a rocking horse and he is sitting on the book. The simple child holds it unopened in his arms. And the child who does not know how to ask is depicted as a jester, juggling balls with his foot on the book. David Moss writes, as in a game of chance, we have no control over the children dealt us. It is our task as parents, as educators, to play our hand based on the attributes of the children we are given. It is the child, not the parent, who must direct the process. This is a wonderful jumping off point to talk about some of those questions. In different years, we've also invited our children to talk about the 4 kinds of parents and what those might be. We now arrive at the long Magid section, which is a rabbinic midrash on a passage in Deuteronomy. And each word is parsed out, and it goes on for some time. We haven't read that passage at our house in as long as I can remember. And usually we play some kind of, in different years, we've had the children do a skit while the adults have a more serious discussion about some theme of the Passover Seder. At the synagogue, we've tended to play a game. Here's the game. It has 3 stories. 1 is false. 2 are true. You have to guess which is which. Anyone who mails me a correct answer before the end of Passover will receive a prize in the mail. By mail, I mean you email me, and I will probably send you a gift certificate, an online gift certificate. No hands will touch these prizes. Okay, story number 1. American Jewish history is full of conflicts between Jewish tradition and sports. Hank Greenberg didn't play in the World Series on Rosh Hashanah. Sandy Koufax didn't play in the World Series on Yom Kippur. Many elementary school age kids get to relive these famous values clarification dilemmas on a weekly basis when soccer practice conflicts with Hebrew school. And for some University of Michigan fans I know, the 2018 second Seder posed a real dilemma, with the Wolverines reaching the Final Four. I don't think that was the Final Four children. But did you know about the Canadian version of this dilemma? Canada's national sport, of course, is hockey. And before the lengthening of the NHL season, hockey fans often had to contend with the Stanley Cup playoffs or finals coinciding with the Passover Seders. It was the Stanley Cup finals of 1953, which were the crescendo of this conflict between religion and sports. The Toronto Maple Leafs were up against the Montreal Canadiens, meaning that most Jews in Canada were rooting for one team or the other. And Game 7 of the best of 7 series was on the second night of Passover. Many Jews from Toronto and Montreal have family stories about their relatives sneaking away from the Seder to listen to the radio broadcast of the game in a different room. What's more, each team's Jewish fans had a special reason to cheer for their team. For the Leafs, it was the fact that the team included Jewish goalie Ross Rosen, affectionately known by his teammates as Rosen the Chosen. I thought he should be the Frozen Chosen, but for the Canadians, though, it was because their team included center and team leader Elijah Braniff. Braniff was not Jewish, but because his first name was Elijah, Jewish Montrealers began referring to the Stanley Cup as Elijah's Cup. In fact, periodically throughout the series, the stadium would erupt with a cheer, Elijah's Cup, Elijah's Cup, Elijah's Cup, to the entertainment of the Jews from both sides. But the Toronto Maple Leafs won the series, so Elijah's fans didn't get to see him drink from his cup that night, which come to think of it, means it was just like every other Seder night. Story number 2. 2 young rabbis arrived in the German city of Speyer 2 days before Passover 2009 with the intention of making a community Seder for the small but growing Speyer Jewish community. They checked into their hotel suite and immediately got to work cleaning and koshering the kitchen for Passover. And then they cooked and prepared food, and then celebrated 2 beautiful nights of Seders on Wednesday and Thursday nights. Then they settled in for what they hoped would be a relaxing Shabbat with the plan to leave on Sunday. But on Shabbat, they got an ominous knock on the door. A German man who spoke no English was yelling at them. It seemed like he was telling them to get out. We aren't supposed to check out until tomorrow, they kept on saying, to no avail. Finally, someone found a translator who clarified the problem. The hotel apparently had made an error and had booked the 2 rabbis for only 3 nights and not for 4 nights, as they had requested. And the hotel was completely full. Despite all their protests, the rabbis were told they would have to leave. The rabbis tried to argue for a while, but eventually realized that it was futile. But they said, "You can throw us out of our room if you want, but we have a Jewish religious holiday today, so we can't help you remove anything, and we will have to stay on the premises until Shabbat is over." The hotel found that to be satisfactory, so the 2 rabbis sat in the courtyard of the hotel while the bewildered hotel staff peeled off the aluminum foil that was covering basically the entire kitchen and removed all the matzah and parsley and horseradish and Seder supplies and brought it out next to where the rabbis were sitting in the courtyard. But what the rabbis saw next was surprising and alarming. Numerous young men walked into the suite with shaved heads, bulging muscles, chains, and multiple tattoos and piercings. Apparently, that's who the next guests were supposed to be. Turns out Shapiro was the host of the annual Satanic Stomp musical festival, and almost the entire hotel was booked by musicians and fans, most of whom had reserved their rooms at least 6 months in advance, which is how the 2 displaced rabbis came to spend their Shabbat afternoon in the courtyard, together with dozens of members and fans of punk and goth bands, including Mad Sin, Lucky Devils, and Coffin Nails. The rabbi said about this encounter, it was the start of an interesting friendship. The rabbi's presence there certainly sparked curiosity and interesting discussions about Judaism and the Exodus. Presumably, the Satanic Stomp fans particularly enjoyed learning about the 10 plagues, especially the wild beasts and death of the firstborn. The rabbis had to decline the offer to share the music fans' beer, as beer is not kosher for Passover, but the rabbis were very happy to share their Passover wine. By the end of the evening, dozens of German punk and goth rockers had learned a new and very useful word, l'chaim. Story number 3. Isn't it strange how the Passover Seder, with all its noble ideals, concludes with Had Gadya, a remarkably inane children's song about how the fire burnt the stick that beat the dog that bit the cat that ate the goat that my father bought for 2 gold coins. Well, Had Gadya, the concluding song of the Seder, apparently has been arousing strong feelings pro and con for several hundred years. For example, a Seder took place around the year 1770, somewhere in Italy or North Africa. And during the Seder, one of the guests said something like, "Isn't it strange how the Passover Seder, with all its noble ideals, concludes with Had Gadya, a remarkably inane children's song about how the fire burnt the stick that beat the dog that bit the cat that ate the goat that my father bought for 2 gold coins?" And another Seder guest was so offended that the second guest stood up, pointed to the first guest, and said, "For your act of impudence and disparagement of a holy Jewish tradition, you are hereby excommunicated." Now, this happened when excommunication was a big deal. It meant that no one in the community was allowed to speak with the person or to do business with him. And so supporters of the man who had been excommunicated wrote a letter to the greatest rabbi of the region, Rabbi David Azulai, with the hope that Rabbi Azulai would say something like, "Don't you guys have a sense of humor? Of course you shouldn't excommunicate someone for making fun of Had Gadya." However, Rabbi Azulai answered, quote, "That impudent man disparaged a deeply held custom of millions of pious and holy and learned Jews. He is indeed deserving of excommunication without any doubt." He then wrote a responsum, a Jewish legal opinion about this. By the way, to make sure no one misunderstands, I think I misspoke about the beginning of this story. What I meant to say was, isn't it so beautiful and holy how the Passover Seder, with all its noble ideals, concludes with Haggadah, a masterpiece of divinely transcendent poetry about how the fire burnt the stick that beat the dog that beat the cat that ate the goat that my father bought for 2 gold coins. Send the answers to rgshapiro430@gmail.com and make a good defense for why 2 were true and 1 was false. And we'll see how it comes out. We now make sure our cups are full and we turn to Vihi She'amda, perhaps on page 30.
Vihi she'amda
Avoteinu velanu.
Vihi she'amda lavoteinu velanu Shelo echad bilvad Amad aleinu lechalotenu Shelo echad bilvad Amad aleinu lechalotenu Ela shebechol dor vador Omdim aleinu lechalotenu Ela shebechol vador Omdim aleinu lechalotenu והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם.
Hold on a second. So, unfortunately, when I gave birth to children, God did not give me an extra hand per child. And so I am unable to remove wine from my cup as we do the 10 plagues and also dramatize them. So I'm going to just dramatize them, and you're going to imagine that I'm also sticking my pinky in a cup and taking out some wine. Now, I want you to know that I learned from a friend who's British that, of course, the British would never stick their fingers in a glass of wine. And that rather, at a British Seder, each person is given a tiny little teaspoon from which to remove their wine. Okay, are we ready, Cantor?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Go nice and slow for me, okay?
Slow. Dam. Wow.
Oh my God! Look, water turning to blood.
Tzfardea.
Uh-oh. He seems to have lost his jump. There he is.
Akinim. Arov.
Wait. Dever. Here's our little cow happily going through the field.
Oh no. Shechin.
We need a replenishment on the screen.
Barad. Arbe. Choshech.
We don't act out the last one. Go ahead. And if you don't have a plague bag, I'm sure that the B'nai Jacob gift shop women would arrange to have one delivered to you from our gift shop, or of course, you can always make one. We come now to Dayenu, I think page 34.
Ilu hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, dayenu, pararapatai, dayenu, 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 dayenu. Torah natan lanu et
Torah
haTorah dayenu. Dayenu.
Dayenu,
Dayenu, dayenu, dayenu, dayenu, dayenu, dayenu, dayenu, dayenu, dayenu. Ilu natan lanu et hashavat natan lanu et hashavat dayenu. Dayenu, 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 dayenu.
In our house, by the way, it's an Afghani custom to take scallions and use them as whips and beat each other with them while we sing Dayenu. Dayenu. What does this mean? It would have been enough. Surely no one of these would have been enough for us. It means to celebrate each step toward freedom as if it were enough, then to start out on the next step. It means that if we reject each step because it is not the whole liberation, we will never be able to achieve the whole liberation. It means to sing each verse as if it were the whole song and then sing the next verse. We now come to Pesach, Matzah, Maror. Rabbi Gamliel used to say that if you didn't speak of these three things, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, you hadn't fulfilled your obligation of the Seder. Now, let's just be clear here. Rabbi Gamliel was the second Nasi, the second head of the Sanhedrin after the destruction of the temple. He ruled from approximately 90 to 110. And he invented the Seder as we know it. And that's very important because for your average Jew living during the years when the temple stood, if you asked him, well, tell me about your Passover, he would say, well, I go with my family up to Jerusalem. We bring a lamb. I bring it to the temple. The priest sacrifices it. It's like a giant barbecue there. You can't even imagine the smell. And then they give us our roasted lamb, and we sit down as a family. Maybe we have some guests with us, and we eat our roasted lamb with matzah and bitter herbs. Did they say Dayenu? I don't think so. 4 questions? Probably not. Kiddush? Who knows? Maybe they had some ritual that goes with it. We don't really know. The point is that once the temple was destroyed, the whole thing could have been over. The whole Judaism could have been over. And instead, the rabbi said, no, we are going to come up with a way to make Seder transportable. That it's going to happen in each home rather than at the temple, which was a genius solution for people who were going to be in exile for a few thousand years. So we have Rabbi Gamliel to thank for the Seder. And the very first thing Rabbi Gamliel says is the Pesach, right, which unlike the other symbols of the Seder, we don't even lift the Pesach, we just point to it. Now you can see that on my Seder plate, we have a beet, not a shank bone. That's because we used to have a vegetarian household, but it also might be difficult to get shank bones this year. And it is acceptable, according to the Talmud, to use a roasted beet. So Rabbi Gamliel said, the Passover sacrifice, what is it? This is the Passover sacrifice that our ancestors were accustomed to eating when the temple stood. For the sake of what? For the sake that the Holy One, blessed he, passed over the homes of our ancestors in Egypt, as it is stated, and you shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, for that he passed over the homes of the children of Israel in Egypt. When he smote the Egyptians in our homes, he saved. And the people bowed their heads and bowed. Then we say, Matzah zo, she'anu ochlim, ashuma. Why do we eat this matzah? You don't have to read the whole thing, you can just say, this is why we eat matzah, right? Because our ancestors fled Egypt in haste, and their dough didn't have time to rise. And so we eat matzah in memory of their fleeing and their haste. Maror zeh, she'anu ochlim, al shuma. Now you'll notice that some Seder plates have just a spot for maror, and here you can see some horseradish. Usually I have fresh horseradish, but I haven't bought that yet. And some Seder plates have a space for chazeret, lettuce. Some don't. Why? Because lettuce is often, probably in the ancient world, there was no horseradish. That grew in Eastern Europe, not in ancient Israel. And so lettuce, which has probably been bred to be sweeter, but was more sour, especially the center stalk, was used as maror. And part of the idea of lettuce is that the outer leaves are sweet, but then as we get toward the stalk, it becomes more bitter, just like slavery. It's the custom. So that's maror. Why do we eat it? To remember the bitterness of slavery. Finally, Rabbi Gamliel said, the most important thing you could say at Seder, in every generation, each person has to make the imaginative leap of seeing themselves as if they went out of Egypt. This is a leap of empathy that informs our moral actions unto the present day.
בכל דור ודור חייבים אנו לראות את עצמנו כאילו יצאנו ממצרים כאילו יצאנו
So when we were talking about Seder last night at home, and I was talking about, well, I said, we'll just use a PDF. And they said, well, but we're gonna have the Mayflower, right? And we're gonna have the last Ethiopian Seder, right? So those are standard bearers in our house. And I'm gonna read you the last Ethiopian Seder, written by my friend Michael Odenheimer, who was there in 1991 in Ethiopia. On Friday night, May 24th, 1991, 14,400 Jews from Beta Israel crowded into the Israeli embassy compound in Addis Ababa, the capital. They were caught between a nightmare and a dream, the danger of slaughter by the rebel army that encircled the capital, and the opportunity to make Aliyah to Israel at the last possible moment before the invasion by the rebels. At the Israeli embassy, 14,400 Jews spent all night long in darkness and exceptional calm and discipline. They experienced a mixture of fear and hope, reminiscent of the children of Israel in Egypt on the first Seder night. That night, the Ethiopian Jews passed from one station to another at the embassy grounds. First, the head of the household's identity card was checked, and his children counted off and given a sticker with the number of their bus to wear on their forehead. Then all their local money had to be thrown into a box as demanded by the Ethiopian government. Afterwards, all their possessions were relinquished, for the Israeli authorities were worried about both bombs and about the lack of space in the planes. Only what they wore, their nicest clothes and gold jewelry, came with them on the planes, along with bread, which was wrapped in their flowing garments. I remembered the biblical verses describing a similar night of vigil in which no one slept on Passover evening in Egypt. The people took their dough before it was leavened, wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders. The children of Israel borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. That was a night of vigil. Even the numbered stickers on the foreheads reminded me of the command, "This shall serve you as a sign upon your hand and as a reminder on your forehead that the Lord freed you from Egypt with a mighty hand." Everyone boarded the buses. Arriving at the airport, they climbed onto airplanes for the first time in their lives. In less than 24 hours, El Al passenger planes, as well as Israeli Air Force Hercules transports, took 14,400 people in the largest, longest, and fastest airlift of refugees in the history of the world. 40 journeys, over 1,560 miles and back in 24 hours. We turn now to page 41, Lefikach. Therefore, Lefikach, אנחנו חייבים להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, לעלה ולקלס, על כל שעשה לאבותינו ולנו, את כל הניסים האלה, הוציאנו מעבדות לחירות, מיגון לשמחה, מאבל ליום טוב, מאפלה לאור גדול, משעבוד לגאולה, ונאמר לפניו שירה חדשה, הללויה.
ונאמר לפניו שירה חדשה, ונאמר לפניו שירה חדשה. Hold on, I need to get you back on the screen, Rabbi Shapiro. Okay. Hallelujah, 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 Avdei Adonai. Hallelujah, 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 et Shem Adonai. Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach, me'ata v'ad olam, mimizrach shemesh ad mevoho, mehula Shem Adonai, lama kol goyim Adonai al hashamayim kevodo. Adonai Eloheinu hamagdihi l'shavet, המשפילי לראות בשמיים ובארץ, המשפילי לראות בשמיים ובארץ, מקימים מהעבר מאשפות ידים אביון, להושיב עם נדיבים עם נדיבי עמו, מושיבי עקרת הבית, עם הבנים שמחה, עם הבנים שמחה, הללויה, הללויה. בצאת ישראל ממצרים, בית יעקב מהלועץ, הייתה יהודה לקודשו, ישראל ממשלותיו, הים רב וינוס, הירדן ייסוב באחור, הערים רקדו חרבים, גבעות כבני צאן, מלך הים,
מלך הים,
איתנוס, הירדן, ייסוב לאחור, ההרים, תרקדו כאלים, גבעות, כבני צאן, מלפני אדון, ולי ארץ, מלפני אלוהי יעקב, ההופכי הצור, אגמים, חלמיש, למיינו מים.
We come now to the second cup of wine. Remember before I talked about a false start. We made kiddush, we washed, but no blessing. We broke bread, but we didn't eat it. Whoops, we can't do this until we tell the story. Now we told the story. We can go back and say kiddush properly, and then wash and eat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Okay. Kadesh Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Ratsa. So can we see here? Here's my washing. I'm going to wash. I'm going to say Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. And now I'm on page 45. And I'm going to take all 3 matzot and say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And then I'm going to put the bottom back on the top in the middle. I'm going to say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. Whoop. And just so you know, I'm eating egg matzah. You shouldn't eat egg matzah for a Seder meal, but before Passover, it's our custom not to eat real matzah so that the matzah tastes new for Passover. So that was Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Raksa Motzi Matzah Maror. Now you might wonder how you might have always wondered, it says dip the maror in the charoset. And if you have maror that looks like this, oh, that's not gonna work. Looks like this. I don't know. I'm not doing very well with the camera here. Well, it looks like the stuff out of a jar. How can you possibly dip it in the haroset? However, this can be accomplished with lettuce. You can make yourself like a little, taco with haroset and maror. And then we can say, okay, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror. And then we say, Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Raksa Motzi Matzah Maror Orech. So Hillel had the big idea that he didn't think it said matzot umarin yochluhu. They ate it on matzah and maror. So he understood that to mean that the meal, the lamb and the maror, had to be eaten, in fact, on the matzah. So he was kind of a literal guy. And long before the Earl of Sandwich, he came up with this sandwich that we're going to eat. And I'm going to say, Zecher lemikdash kehilel, ken asa Hillel, b'zman shebeit hamikdash haya kayam, haya korech matzah maror, ve'ochel b'yachad, l'kayem ma she'namar al matzot u'marim yochluhu. Okay. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Raksa Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech. So now it's time for you to eat. I hope that you have a wonderful feast. And when you're done eating, come join us for the end of the Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Raksa Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tzafun. So somebody returned to me this lovely afikomen. I established that it was the correct afikomen, not an imitation of the one I sent out. I paid off my bribes accordingly, and now I'm going to have a bite of it, which should be the last thing you eat at your Passover meal. Okay. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Raksa Motzi Matzah Maror, Horech, Shulchan, Horech, Zafun, Parech. So that's Birkat Hamazon, page 50.
Shir Hamalot B'Shuv Adonai
Et Batzion Hayinu Kecholmi.
Azimanes Fokinu Ushonenu Rina Az Yomru V'Hagoyim Higdil Adonai La'asot Imela Higdil Adonai La'asot Imanu Hayinu Semechim Shuv Adonai Et Shevitenu Kafikim Ba'aneg Azorim Bedima Berina Yiktoru Haloch Yelechu Vacho Nose Meshech Hazara Bo Yavo Yavo Berina Nose Alumotav
Chavarai Nevarach.
Merachmet Havyad Olam
Yeishim Merachmet Havyad Olam. Bershut Maranan V'Robatai Nevarach Shachanu Mishalo.
Baruch Shechanu Mishalov Tivaho Chayinu
Baruch Shechanu Mishalo Uvtuvo Hayinu.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Hazan et haolam kulo B'tuvo B'chein B'chesed U'rachamim Hu noten lechem lechol basar Ki leolam chasto Uvtuvo hagadol Tamid lo chasar lanu V'yal yachsar lanu Mahazon leolam va'et Ba'avor shemo hagadol Gozan u'parnes lahakol U'metiv lahakol U'mechin mahazon lechol bilotav Asher ba'ara baruch atah Adonai Hazan et hakol.
We're skipping to the end. Migdal Yeshuot Malko Yosef Chesed Limshicho LeDavid uLezaro Ad Olam Oseh Shalom Bimrumav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imeru Amen. Yirot Adonai Kedoshav Ein Machzor L'Re'ah K'fi Rimashu V'Ra'evu V'Dorshei Adonai Lo Nisimkoto Hodu Adonai Ki Tov Ki Le'olam Chasto Poteach Et Yadecha U'Masbiya Lecho Charatzon
Hey, Baruch
Baruch HaGever Asher Yiftach Adonai V'Haya Adonai Miftacho Na'iti Gam Zakanti V'Lo Hayiti Tzadik Nezav V'Zaro Mevakesh Lachem V'Zaro Mevakesh Lachem Adonai Oz Me'amo Yitem Adonai Yivarech Et Amo V'Shalom Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Borei Peri Hagafen. And now we come to Elijah's cup, followed by Miriam's cup. So we'll make sure Elijah has wine. Everyone can see Elijah's wine here? No, I'm not very good with this camera. There we go. You see Elijah, and you see his wine in there?
Uh-huh.
Okay, we're going to the door. Maybe Elijah will come early this year. Okay, there's definitely birds. And we sing.
Eliyahu Hanavi,
Eliyahu Hatishbi,
Eliyahu, 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 Adi, Bimhera, Yameinu, Yavo Eleinu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David.
And it's our custom. So I have this beautiful Miriam's cup that David made at one of those paint the pot places many years ago. And it says on it, V'tikach Miriam Nevi'ah et hatov bi'ada. And Miriam, the prophetess, took the timbrel in her hand. And it's our custom at our Seder to pass the Miriam's cup around and have each person take a little water from their glass and pour it into here and express a wish for the year to come. And we can sing, just like we sang Eliyahu's same tune. Miriam
HaNeviah, Ozis Nimratya,
Miriam Tir Koditanu Lehagdi
Nimrat Olam,
Miriam Tir Koditanu Letaken et Haolam Imera B'Yameinu Itavienu El Mei HaYeshua El Mei HaYeshua. And now, fourth cup.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
We turn to Nirtzah, which might be on page 58. And we're going to read this. I'd go around and read this with your guess. This time, Cantor and I will read. Risking together what we never imagined possible on our own, we keep walking. The sea rises to our nostrils. Then, with a breath, the waters part.
Following the fire and cloud, we stumble through endless desert. At night, we build fragile shelters that sway in the wind. The water is too bitter to drink. Even manna sometimes tastes like sand.
Some cry out for Egypt, long to return to the known. How does their journey to freedom continue?
You go.
We reawaken deep yearnings for history and song, for learning and connection.
We glimpse new possibilities for our lives and our communities, for our families and the world.
Some begin to plot change immediately. Others sit in the silence and absorb. For ours is a holy journey. We falter, but will not turn back. Embracing the challenge of tradition, we clear new paths to the future. Ours is a holy journey, a journey towards new song. For hundreds of years, Seders have concluded with the words next year in Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, a name that means city of peace, integrity, wholeness.
Jerusalem, a city of walls, ancient and new. Walls of apricot Jerusalem stone. Walls of misunderstanding, hatred, and violence between religious and secular, Jew and Arab, woman and man. Jerusalem,
what is our hope for your rebuilding?
And together, a year of equality and inclusiveness, a year of wholeness for our people, a year of peace for all the peoples who sing to you. Jerusalem. Nirtzah, page 60, or maybe 61.
Chasal Sidor Pesach Kecho
Mishpato Kahato
Kasher Zachinu L'Seir Yizkel Hasoto Tzach Shochein Me'ona Komem Kehaladan Imana Bekarov Nahel Nitechana Peduim Letzion Berina Leshana Haba B'Yerushalayim 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 Adirhu Yivne Beito Bekarov Bimheira B'Yameinu Bekarov El b'nei Beitcha Bekarov Bachorhu Gadolhu Daguhu Yivne Beito Bekarov Bimheira B'Yameinu Bekarov El b'nei Beitcha Bekarov Hadorhu Vatiku Zakaihu Chasidhu Yivne Beito Bekarov Bimheira V'Yameinu Bekarov El b'nei Beitcha Bekarov Echad Miyodea. Oh boy. Okay. Echad Miyodea. This is page 62. Echad Miyodea. Echad Miyodea. Echad Eloheinu Sheba Shemayim Uvaretz Shnayim Yodea Shnayim Ani Yodea Shnei Luchot HaBrit Echad Eloheinu Sheba Shemayim Uvaretz Shlosha Mi Yodea Shlosha ani yodea, Shlosha avot, Shnei luchot habrit, Echad Eloheinu, Sheba shamayim uvaretz, Arba mi yodea, Arba ani yodea, Arba imahot, Shlosha avot, Shnei luchot habrit, Echad Eloheinu, Sheba shamayim uvaretz, Chamisha mi yodea, Chamisha ani yodea, Chamisha chumshei Torah, Arba imahot, Shlosha avot, Shnei luchot habrit, Echad Eloheinu, Sheba shamayim uvaretz, Shisha mi yodea, Shisha ani yodea, Shisha sidrei Mishnah, Chamisha chumshei Torah, Arba imahot, Shlosha avot, Shnei luchot habrit, Eloheinu. Sheba shamayim uva'aretz, Shiva mi yodea, Shiva ani yodea, שבעה ימי שבת שישה סדרי משנה חמישה חומשי תורה ארבע אמהות שלושה אבות שני הלכות הברית אחד אלוהינו 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 שבשמיים ובארץ שמונה מי יודע שמונה אני יודע שמונה ימי מילה שבעה ימי שבת שישה סדרי משנה חמישה חומשי תורה ארבע אמהות שלושה אבות שני הלכות הברית אחד אלוהינו 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 שבשמיים ובארץ תשעה מי יודע תשעה אני יודע תשעה ירחי לידה שמונה ימי מילה שבעה ימי שבת שישה סדרי משנה חמישה חומשי תורה ארבע אמהות שלושה אבות שני הלכות הברית אחד אלוהינו 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 שבשמיים ובארץ עשרה מי יודע עשרה אני יודע עשרה דברי תשעה ירחי לידה שמונה ימי מילה שבעה ימי שבת שישה סדרי משנה חמישה חומשי תורה ארבע אמהות שלושה אבות שני הלכות הברית אחד אלוהינו 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 שבשמיים ובארץ 11 מי יודע 11 אני יודע 11 כופיה 10 דבריה 9 ירחי לידה 8 ימי מילה 7 ימי שבת 6 סדרי משנה 5 חומשי תורה 4 אמהות 3 אבות שני הלכות הברית אחד אלוהינו 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 שבשמיים ובארץ almost there 12 מי יודע 12 12 שבטיה 11 כוכביה 10 דבריה 9 ירחי לידה 8 ימי מילה 7 ימי שבתה 6 סדרי משנה 5 חומשי תורה 4 אמהות 3 אבות שני הלכות הברית אחד אלוהינו 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 שבשמיים ובארץ 13 מי יודע 13 אני יודע 13 מידיה 12 שבטיה 11 כופיה 10 דבריה 9 ירחי לידה 8 ימי מילה 7 ימי שבת 6 סדרי משנה 5 חומשי תורה 4 אמהות 3 אבות שני הלכות הברית אחד אלוהינו 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. All right.